Once upon a time, there was this thing called colonialism. And two of the biggest colonial empires were France and Britain. In this era, the French did something kind of unique. They helped fund the Suez Canal. That canal would obviously be important, especially for the British. They needed it. The British purchased Egypt's shares of the canal and then occupied the country in 1882. And that's how things remained for almost 80 years. Until one day, one man made one decision, completely throwing everyone off course. This is the Suez Crisis. So who was that somebody? That man was this man, Gamal Abdel Nasser. Nasser hated two things: monarchism and the British. As for the British, Nasser had this agreement with them. Made in 1954, it stated that the UK would leave the Suez Canal zone within a year and a half, by 1956. That sounded great, but there was a catch. The British could return if any Arab League country, plus Turkey, was attacked. And that was only the first issue. The second issue was money. Generally speaking, whenever something is made within the borders of a certain country, especially if it's dependent on the land of that country, the money made goes to the home country. But that was not the case for the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal Company, as we said, was 100% French and British owned, meaning Egypt, and certainly Nasser, were not making money off of it. That being said, Nasser's relationship with the British wasn't the best, to say the least. The thing is, however, Britain wasn't the only one around. Imagine you're an American in the 1950s. Among the plethora of things that you can hate, one thing stands out: communism. America had a slightly simple rule at this time: oppose communism and we'll back you. Turning to the Middle East, Nasser may have been a socialist, but he was certainly not a communist. To support Nasser's non-communist rule, the Americans, with the British, funded the Aswan High Dam. The Americans wanted to keep Egypt on their side of the global competition between its capitalist-led world order and the Soviet-led communist bloc. But then, Nasser did the deed. In 1955, Egypt bought weapons from the Soviet Union. America, in response, cut off funding for the Aswan Dam. That being said, for Nasser, there were many pressures. If you're the nationalistic leader of a post-colonial state, you probably need money, and to assert yourself internationally. Show the world who you are, while also taking what's yours. Balance against American, British, and Soviet pressures, while simultaneously exercising Egyptian sovereignty and maintaining a flow of money, be it through international patrons or, as probably factored into Nasser's thinking, the Suez Canal. Having said that, one evening in July of 1956, Gamal Abdel Nasser came out and gave a speech in Alexandria, a speech announcing the nationalization of the Suez Canal.
قرار من رئيس الجمهورية بتأميم الشركة العالمية لقناة السويس.
Decades of British occupation were officially over. In Cairo, what just happened was a great thing. But in London and Paris, what had happened was a disaster. European oil supplies, just recovering from World War II, would now be dependent on Egypt's sometimes pro-Soviet and sometimes pro-European foreign policy. It goes without saying, it was not a great strategy. And as a result, it was time for a conspiracy. A secret meeting was held in Paris, attended by British, French, and Israeli government officials. They agreed on the following: the Israeli military would launch an invasion of Egypt, take over the Sinai Peninsula, and reach the Suez Canal. By which point, the canal would probably be in an unstable position. So that is when the French and the British would come in, demand that the Egyptians and the Israelis withdraw 10 miles from the canal zone, and establish Anglo-French occupation of the region. And that is exactly what happened. The canal was back in the right hands, and the free world's oil supplies were safe. Right? So So here's the thing. The French, British, and Israelis kind of forgot to do something. Tell America. And America was furious. Its allies had launched an invasion of a foreign country, risking a potential confrontation with the Soviet Union without telling it? No, that was crazy. Not just that, but things were about to get worse. Nasser had blocked the Suez Canal, preventing anything from getting through. And at the same time in Syria, oil pipelines carrying energy from the Gulf to the Mediterranean were sabotaged. What this meant was that Europe was running low on fuel, and America wasn't going to give it anything just yet. The Americans threatened the French and the British with sanctions if they didn't withdraw, meaning that for them, the operation had ended in a disaster. The British and French power had faced a major setback, and no longer were they the ones calling the shots. That was a major victory for Nasser, especially given how much he did not like the British. But there was still a small problem. American pressure had gotten the British and the French to withdraw. It didn't exactly work with the Israelis, however, for they had other ideas. Now you may be asking, why did the Israelis join the war to begin with? The thing is, the state of Israel isn't exactly surrounded by friends. Its friends were kind of far away, and it needed good ways to reach those friends. If it could secure the Strait of Tiran and the Suez Canal, that would benefit it overall. In the end, they mostly won out, with Israeli ships free to sail through the Strait of Tiran and UN peacekeepers being sent to the Sinai Peninsula. After about 5 months, the Americans did get the Israelis to withdraw, but the UN peacekeepers would put some distance between the Egyptian and Israeli population centers. Overall though, the true winner of this conflict was the man himself, Gamal Abdel Nasser. Even though it was a military defeat, the war saw Nasser's popularity absolutely skyrocket. He had faced down the French and British empires and actually won. From now on, he would not just be the face of Egypt or even of the Arab world, but a face of anti-colonialism in general. He now had influence and legitimacy in the eyes of millions across the planet, and he was planning on using it. That, however, is the next episode. So until then, thank you for watching.